Emily Parker was born and raised in the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio. Her parents, Richard and Ann Parker, were well-respected members of the community. Richard owned a local hardware store, while Ann was a nurse at the nearby hospital. Emily, the middle child with an older brother, Jack, and a younger sister, Sarah, was the apple of her parents' eyes. From an early age, Emily exhibited a zest for life. She was an exceptional student, excelling in her studies and participating in various extracurricular activities. Her passion for teaching emerged during her high school years, inspired by a history teacher who brought the past to life in vivid detail. Emily pursued her dream by attending Ohio State University, where she earned her degree in education. After college, Emily returned to Maplewood and secured a teaching position at the local elementary school. Her dedication to her students was unparalleled. She often stayed late to help with after-school programs and tutored struggling students on weekends. Her colleagues admired her enthusiasm, and parents often requested her for their children's classes. Outside of her professional life, Emily had a wide range of interests. She loved hiking, photography, and reading historical novels. Her weekends were often spent exploring nature trails or curled up with a good book. Friends described her as warm, compassionate, and always ready to lend a helping hand. Emily met David Reynolds at a friend's wedding. He was charming, with a quick wit and an easy smile. David, a financial consultant from New York City, was visiting for the wedding. The attraction was immediate, and their whirlwind romance took everyone by surprise. David lavished Emily with attention, expensive gifts, and exotic trips. Their courtship was brief but intense, and within a year David proposed. Emily, swept off her feet by his charisma and the promise of a glamorous life, said yes. Her family and friends had mixed feelings about the rapid engagement. While they wanted to support Emily's happiness, they couldn't shake a sense of unease about David. He was always impeccably dressed, driving luxury cars and staying in upscale hotels, but his extravagant lifestyle seemed at odds with his modest background. Emily, however, was enamored and reassured everyone that David was her soulmate. Their wedding was a grand affair, held in a picturesque vineyard and attended by over 200 guests. Emily's friends from Maplewood and David's associates from New York mingled under fairy lights and sipped champagne, celebrating the union. As the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon in St. Lucia, no one could have predicted the dark turn their love story would take. David Reynolds was born and raised in Queens, New York. His parents, Thomas and Margaret Reynolds, struggled to make ends meet. Thomas worked as a mechanic, while Margaret held various part-time jobs to support their 3 children. David, the eldest, grew up with a strong drive to escape the financial hardships of his upbringing. From a young age, David exhibited a knack for numbers and a shrewd understanding of money. He excelled in school, earning a scholarship to New York University where he studied finance. David's ambition was evident. He spent his college years networking and securing internships at prestigious firms. His relentless work ethic paid off, and upon graduation, he landed a coveted position at a top financial consultancy. David quickly rose through the ranks, his talent for investment strategies and financial planning earning him a reputation as a rising star. His success afforded him a lifestyle he had always dreamed of: designer suits, high-end cars, and a luxury apartment in Manhattan. However, his professional success masked deeper issues. Colleagues often described David as charming but ruthless, willing to bend the rules to achieve his goals. David's personal life was equally complex. His charm attracted many women, but his relationships were often short-lived. He had a series of high-profile romances, each ending abruptly amid rumors of infidelity and deceit. Despite this, he maintained a polished public image, carefully curating his social media to portray a life of sophistication and success. When David met Emily Parker, she represented something different. Her genuine warmth and small-town innocence were a stark contrast to the superficial relationships he was accustomed to. To his friends, it seemed like David was truly in love for the first time. But as their relationship progressed, cracks began to appear. David's financial empire was not as solid as it seemed. Behind the scenes, he was entangled in risky investments and mounting debts. David's financial troubles were compounded by his extravagant spending habits. He kept these issues hidden from Emily, presenting only the image of a successful and devoted partner. His decision to propose was as much about securing a future with Emily as it was about seeking stability amid his growing financial chaos. Their wedding, though a joyous occasion, also marked the point where David's deceptions began to catch up with him. St. Lucia, with its lush landscapes and serene beaches, was the perfect backdrop for David and Emily's honeymoon. They stayed at an exclusive resort, their bungalow perched on the edge of a secluded cove. The first few days were filled with romantic dinners, sunset walks, and excursions to explore the island's natural beauty. Emily documented their adventures on social media, her posts filled with joy and excitement. On the night of Emily's disappearance, the couple dined at the resort's beachfront restaurant. The atmosphere was idyllic. Soft music played in the background, and tiki torches flickered in the gentle breeze. Fellow diners noticed the couple laughing and holding hands, seemingly in love. The staff, accustomed to honeymooners, paid them little special attention. After dinner, David suggested a moonlit walk along the beach. Emily, always one for romance, readily agreed. They strolled along the water's edge, the sound of the waves mingling with their conversation. David later recounted that Emily had expressed a desire to take a swim. She slipped off her sandals and waded into the water, the moonlight casting a silver glow on her figure. According to David, he returned to their bungalow to fetch a jacket for Emily. When he came back, she was gone. Panic set in as he searched the beach, calling her name. He alerted the resort staff, who joined the search, but Emily was nowhere to be found. David's distress seemed genuine as he spoke with the resort's manager, his voice cracking and hands trembling. The following morning, the local police were notified. They began an immediate investigation, questioning resort staff and guests. Divers searched the waters near the beach, and sniffer dogs were brought in to track any scent that might lead to Emily. Despite their efforts, no clues emerged. The beach was combed for any personal items, but nothing was found. As the hours turned into days, David's behavior began to attract scrutiny. He appeared genuinely distraught, but there were moments when his composure seemed forced. The police noted his meticulous recounting of events, almost as if rehearsed. Resort staff mentioned his insistence on calling his lawyer soon after Emily's disappearance, which struck them as odd. Witnesses provided conflicting accounts. Some recalled seeing the couple arguing earlier in the day, while others described them as affectionate. A few guests reported hearing raised voices from their bungalow the night before Emily vanished. The police were left with a puzzling mix of evidence and testimonies that painted an inconsistent picture of the couple's final hours together. As the investigation stalled, David's narrative was the only story available. His plea for information was broadcast on news networks, his tearful face becoming the public image of a grieving husband. Yet behind the scenes, Detective Hayes was piecing together a different story, one that hinted at a more sinister truth. Detective Hayes arrived at the resort, greeted by the tropical heat and the sight of tourists enjoying their vacations, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding. His first step was to interview David Reynolds. Sitting across from him in the resort's lounge, Hayes observed David's demeanor carefully. The man seemed genuinely distraught, but there was an underlying tension that the seasoned detective couldn't ignore. David recounted the events of the night Emily disappeared, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety. Hayes listened intently, asking pointed questions about their activities, their relationship, and any possible reasons Emily might have had to leave suddenly. David's answers were consistent, but Hayes felt they were too polished, as if rehearsed. The detective then spoke with the resort staff and other guests. The accounts varied, some aligning with David's story while others contradicted it. A waitress at the restaurant mentioned that David seemed agitated during dinner, frequently checking his phone. A couple staying in a neighboring bungalow reported hearing an argument late at night, although they couldn't make out the words. Hayes' team searched the couple's bungalow and the surrounding area. They found Emily's belongings neatly packed, her passport and wallet untouched. Her phone was missing, presumably with her. A thorough examination of the beach yielded no new clues. The tide and weather had likely washed away any trace evidence. As the days passed, the investigation broadened. Hayes looked into David's background, finding a man who was both successful and secretive. His financial records revealed a troubling pattern. Despite his high-paying job, David was deep in debt. Large withdrawals from his accounts suggested a gambling problem, and several investments had failed spectacularly. Hayes interviewed David's colleagues and friends in New York, uncovering a different side of him. They described David as charming, but unreliable, with a penchant for risky ventures and a history of romantic entanglements. One colleague, who requested anonymity, mentioned that David had recently been involved in a scandal at work, hinting at financial misconduct. The detectives' team also analyzed phone records and bank statements, uncovering a web of transactions that pointed to financial distress. Several large transfers had been made to offshore accounts, and David had taken out substantial loans shortly before the wedding. These findings suggested that David was far from the affluent figure he portrayed. As suspicion around David grew, the investigation took a dramatic turn with the discovery of a letter in Emily's handwriting, found hidden in her suitcase. It was addressed to her parents and hinted at her growing unease about David. She wrote about discovering discrepancies in his stories and financial dealings, expressing fear that she had made a terrible mistake in marrying him. The evidence was mounting, and Detective Hayes felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. But without Emily, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. The detective was determined to uncover the truth, knowing that the facade of the perfect honeymoon was hiding something far more sinister. The financial investigation into David Reynolds' affairs revealed a cascade of deceit. Detective Hayes and his team uncovered a complex network of bank accounts, hidden assets, and dubious transactions. David's financial empire, once thought to be thriving, was crumbling under the weight of risky investments and substantial debts. As Hayes delved deeper, he discovered that David had been involved in several questionable business ventures. One such venture was a failed real estate development in Florida, which had resulted in significant losses for investors. Another was a tech startup that went bankrupt, leaving David with substantial debts. These ventures, combined with his gambling habits, had drained his resources and left him in a precarious financial position. David's secret debts and business failures provided a possible motive for foul play. With Emily's disappearance, questions arose about potential life insurance policies or other financial benefits he might gain. Hayes' team found that David had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Emily, raising further suspicions. Testimonies from friends and colleagues about David's character began to form a consistent narrative. They described him as someone who would do anything to maintain his image of success, even if it meant deceiving those closest to him. Emily, it seemed, had been drawn into a web of lies and financial manipulation. The mounting evidence suggested that David's involvement in Emily's disappearance was more than just circumstantial. His financial desperation, coupled with the inconsistencies in his story, pointed to a more sinister motive. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes knew that the key to solving the case lay in uncovering the full extent of David's deceit and the secrets he had worked so hard to conceal. As the investigation deepened, another layer of David Reynolds' double life began to unfold. His extramarital affairs. Detectives uncovered a series of clandestine relationships that painted a picture of a man far different from the devoted husband he appeared to be. David's phone records and emails revealed communications with several women, some of whom he had met through his business dealings, while others were casual encounters. These relationships ranged from fleeting flings to more serious entanglements. Detective Hayes and his team meticulously tracked down and interviewed these women, each conversation revealing more about David's deceptive nature. One of the women, Laura Mitchell, a marketing executive from New York, provided crucial insight. She described her relationship with David as passionate but tumultuous. They had met at a conference a year before his wedding, and their affair continued well into his engagement with Emily. Laura was unaware of David's upcoming marriage until she saw the wedding announcement on social media. Feeling betrayed, she ended their relationship but kept records of their communications, which she willingly shared with the investigators. Another woman, Jessica Evans, a real estate agent from Miami, had a similar story. She and David had met during one of his business trips, and their affair was marked by lavish gifts and extravagant promises. Jessica, too, was in the dark about David's marital status. She described him as attentive and affectionate, but noted his tendency to vanish for days without explanation. The most damning testimony came from Rachel Turner, a colleague from his firm who had been involved with David for nearly 2 years. Rachel's account revealed a pattern of manipulation and deceit. She recounted how David had confided in her about his financial troubles, painting himself as a victim of unfortunate circumstances. Rachel, deeply infatuated with him, had even loaned him money on several occasions, believing his promises to repay her once his investments paid off. These revelations had a profound impact on the case. They not only established a pattern of deceit, but also suggested potential motives for Emily's disappearance. David's affairs indicated a man capable of maintaining multiple lives, each carefully compartmentalized to prevent discovery. His ability to juggle these relationships while hiding his financial troubles from Emily spoke to his skill at deception. Interviews with his past lovers painted a picture of a man driven by a need for validation and material success. They described how David would often speak of his ambitions and dreams, using his charm to elicit sympathy and support. His relationships, both romantic and financial, were tools he used to navigate his increasingly precarious life. The impact of these revelations on the case was significant. They provided a motive for foul play, suggesting that David might have seen Emily as both an obstacle and a solution to his problems. With his financial empire collapsing and his web of lies unraveling, the pressure on David had reached a breaking point. Emily's disappearance, and the subsequent focus on David, threatened to expose his entire charade. As Detective Hayes pieced together the evidence, it became clear that the investigation was far from straightforward. Each new discovery added complexity to the case, revealing the depths of David's deceit and the lengths he was willing to go to maintain his facade. The true challenge lay in proving his involvement beyond doubt, a task that required uncovering every hidden aspect of his life. Just when Detective Hayes believed he had a clear picture of David Reynolds' involvement in Emily's disappearance, a shocking twist emerged. A mysterious figure, previously unknown to the investigation, came forward with information that turned the case on its head. The figure was a man named Alex Carter, a private investigator from New York. Alex contacted Detective Hayes, claiming to have crucial information about David Reynolds and his activities. Intrigued and cautious, Hayes arranged a meeting. In a dimly lit cafe, Alex revealed his connection to the case. Alex explained that he had been hired by an anonymous client to investigate David Reynolds months before Emily's disappearance. His client had suspected David of financial misconduct and infidelity, and Alex's investigation had uncovered significant evidence of both. He had been tracking David's movements and communications, documenting his secret affairs and shady business dealings. But Alex's most startling revelation was about Emily. According to his findings, Emily had discovered David's infidelity and financial troubles shortly before their wedding. She had confided in a close friend, expressing her doubts and fears about marrying David. This friend, concerned for Emily's safety, had anonymously hired Alex to gather evidence, hoping to give Emily a way out of her situation. Alex provided Detective Hayes with a dossier of his findings, including photographs, financial records, and transcripts of conversations. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a recording of a conversation between David and an unknown associate discussing plans that hinted at foul play. The recording suggested that David had been plotting something sinister, although the details were vague. This new information complicated the case significantly. It introduced the possibility that Emily might have been aware of David's plans and had taken steps to protect herself. Detective Hayes considered the idea that Emily could have staged her disappearance to escape David's clutches, although the lack of concrete evidence made this theory difficult to prove. Hayes decided to re-interview everyone involved, armed with the new information. He spoke again with Emily's family and friends, uncovering more details about her state of mind before the wedding. Emily's best friend, Lisa, revealed that Emily had been increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to the honeymoon. She had confided in Lisa about her fears and mentioned the anonymous tipster who had warned her about David. David's reaction to the reopened investigation was one of surprise and agitation. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance and dismissed the evidence provided by Alex Carter as fabrications. However, his growing frustration and inconsistent statements only added to the suspicion surrounding him. The twist in the case forced Detective Hayes to consider all possibilities. He intensified the search for Emily, exploring the idea that she might have gone into hiding. The investigation expanded to include airports, border crossings, and potential safe houses. The media coverage, once focused solely on David, began to speculate about Emily's fate and her possible role in the unfolding drama. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes faced mounting pressure to solve the case. The new information from Alex Carter provided valuable leads, but it also complicated the narrative, making it harder to distinguish between victim and perpetrator. Hayes knew that the truth lay somewhere within the tangled web of deceit and betrayal, and he was determined to unravel it. The investigation into Emily Parker's disappearance stretched on for months, with Detective Hayes and his team following every lead, no matter how tenuous. The case had become a national obsession, with the media closely monitoring every development. Public opinion was divided. Some believed David Reynolds was guilty of foul play, while others speculated that Emily had staged her own disappearance to escape a troubled marriage. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A hiker in a remote part of St. Lucia discovered a makeshift campsite hidden in the dense jungle. Among the belongings were items that matched the descriptions of Emily's possessions, including a distinctive bracelet she was known to wear. The discovery reignited the investigation, with search teams scouring the area for further clues. Eventually, they found Emily. She was alive but severely dehydrated and disoriented. Emily had indeed staged her disappearance, driven by fear and desperation, after uncovering David's deceit and feeling trapped in the marriage. She had fled into the jungle, intending to disappear entirely, but the harsh conditions had taken a toll on her health. Emily's rescue brought a mix of relief and outrage. While many were glad she was safe, questions about her actions and the trauma she endured dominated the public discourse. Detective Hayes interviewed Emily extensively, piecing together her story. She described the mounting pressure she felt after discovering David's infidelities and financial troubles. The anonymous tip from Alex Carter had been the final straw, prompting her to take drastic action. David Reynolds was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit harm. The evidence provided by Alex Carter, combined with Emily's testimony, built a strong case against him. During the trial, the full extent of David's deceit was laid bare. His financial empire had been a house of cards, supported by lies and illegal activities. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The aftermath of the case left lasting scars on everyone involved. Emily returned to Maplewood, where she began the long process of healing with the support of her family and friends. She became an advocate for domestic abuse victims, sharing her story to help others in similar situations. The media's fascination with her life eventually faded, but Emily remained a symbol of resilience and survival. Detective Hayes reflected on the case as one of the most challenging of his career. It had been a journey through layers of deception and human frailty, revealing the dark complexities of love, trust, and betrayal. The resolution, while not entirely satisfying, brought a measure of justice and closure to those affected. In the end, the case of Emily Parker's disappearance was a stark reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction, and that beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives, there can lie a twisted web of secrets waiting to be uncovered.